Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This is crazy. Have you ever wanted to play a absolutely crazy, insane fantasy warlord battle arena with good versus evil, lawful versus chaotic, and you spawn your army from choosing stuff in a booklet? And each unit is massively detailed, but the simplest unit probably at least as complicated as most trading card game units. And each unit attacks in its own way, or has multiple types of attacks. But that's not just it, units have specific weaknesses and attributes with flying in the game, to have combat be like a tactical role-playing game. Yeah, there will be even area of effect abilities and terrain. And then there is zero randomness, no randomness at all. So if this all sounds up your alley, man, you'll be interested in this multi-hour long game for 2 to 6 players. This game is a lot. It's a lot, you have been warned. If you want to check out a shorter game that's maybe 3 to 4 hours for multiplayer, check out our apprentice review of Warbonds in the top right corner over there. And we made that review first, so we're borrowing many clips from there. Okay, on to the review. Fast how to play. Goal of the game is to kill your enemies, that is either kill their warlord or their base called a war camp by reducing their HP to 0. Also, you can show up with your army to the neutral settlements on the map, blow your trumpet, and announce your support. And once they're under your protection, if they upgrade to level 6, you win the game. So we got each player being a warlord roaming around Vitoria, fighting to the death. Warlords have different stats, like health, their attacking stats, and special abilities. You know what else has all that stuff? The troops you can spawn. So Warbonds isn't just your warlord running around, it's also getting other dudes to help them fight, called squads. These squads are filled with very similar stuff to the warlords, just weaker, like their army size, which is like health, attacking stats, and their abilities. You can also recruit elite units, which are similar to squads, just way more expensive to purchase, as every time you deploy a unit, you must pay a fee. You start with 100 gold and have some income from your war camp and settlements that are under your protection. Every unit, warlord, squad, or elite will have an initiative, which basically shows how fast they go in a round. Every unit will have a single turn as we go from left to right on this initiative table. So here we'll start with this fast warlord, who will first take their turn, which is them moving according to their movement stat. Then performing a single action, like attacking, deploying another unit, or using a special ability. Say they're done, and now we go to the next piece, which is a squad. These guys are archers, so they have a range attack of 2 spaces away. You're not attacking a flying thing, so you're not getting an additional attack. Wait, what, an additional attack? What does that mean? Well, funny thing about Warbond's attack system is that when you do an attack action, each attack actually only does 1 damage, but you have multiple attacks per turn, aka you swing multiple times. To spawn units, you can take another unit's action to spawn, aka deploy them on specific terrain. Find a unit in this booklet that says it can be spawned on that area, and it has to match your warlord alignment. Good warlords can never spawn evil units, and evil warlords also cannot spawn the good units. Some units can never be spawned on wild terrain, rather they must come from a war camp or settlement. And so when you get to your war camp's turn, you can use the war camp's turn to spawn a unit. As for settlements, these also get a turn, and whoever has them under their protection gets to do a thing with them, like spawning units. Squads have a token that's real important called loyalty. Being loyal is important so they don't suddenly leave you one day for another boyfriend, even though they said they liked you. Warlord. Loyalty is especially useful in duels, which we'll cover in a bit. Chaos units gain loyalty by seeing their warlord attacking while they watch from close by, whereas law units get loyalty from attacking things while their warlord watches. These things are warlords' leadership tokens, which they gain in their own ways, and can use to pay for their special abilities. Then you do the end of round stuff, like getting money from your war camp, paying upkeep for all your units, or choosing to concede. Wait, what? Yeah, choosing to concede. End of turn stuff also includes moving the dragon to the right, where a special end of round thing happens, like here everyone just gets loyalty. Or here your warlord can persuade, aka convert an enemy squad to your side. That's why loyalty is good. One last thing, dueling, where if your warlord is right next to another warlord, it's an action to challenge the other to a duel. Then the rest of the game freezes, and you use this dueling sheet, where warlords just play out rounds of attacking each other once. And squads nearby the duel on the map can spend 1 loyalty to literally run into the duel and do an attack of their own or block an attack. Anyways, for this dueling, it keeps going until one player chooses to surrender that fight, probably saving their life, but making all their nearby chaos and law squads usually lose loyalty. And that's the bare bones of the game. You just keep moving up this initiative table until one person either kills all the other warlords or war camps or has their settlement reach level 6. But that's just the bare bones of the game. There's much more. But we'll get into that as we get onto the review. So let's go. Now it's time for the pros of this. And where to start with the variety with the warlords. You got 12 different warlords you can play. To start off simple, you can play as Tengus Unchained, who is a big bruiser orc that rewards you for attacking an opponent's war camp. This guy loves to build up a beefy army and eventually launch a massive assault into their opponent's camp, getting leadership by challenging enemy warlords to a duel on the way. Then Tengus can use that leadership to slightly heal himself and get even more damage in a single turn. Or you could play as the mage, Scarred Rufus the Red, who can perform a tattoo ritual, letting each of his surrounding units sacrifice a bit of health for him to get leadership. But wait, it's not always them taking damage, because this is death damage, meaning that if you do this with certain undead units, that won't affect them. Or just play as an Ironheart Dwarf, who can literally deforest, yes, delete forest terrain, and get a growth token to help level up settlements. Or if you're feeling particularly adventurous, play as this Conflicted Warlock that starts with 12 tokens, 6 good and 6 bad. When she runs out of one of these types of tokens, she transforms into a new form, healing herself and getting tons of new abilities. There's just so many warlord types, from a meditating monk, a child genius that can teleport units across the board, even one that can manipulate unit initiatives. We kid you not, each game feels so different with each warlord. But the warlord variety is not really what makes Warbonds Warbonds. This is. You know what this is? No, it's not the rulebook. It's the catalog of things you can buy, the units you can spawn in this game. My gosh, the variety in here is just staggering. Okay, so we did some quick math and there's 3 units per page with 21 pages, so there's 63 units you can buy, split up into squads and elites. Okay, sure, you can't spawn all the units, some will be a different alignment than your warlord, but it's fine to choose from like 40 because each unit has so much depth. Look at all this, it's like each unit is a minigame. We got the Phalanx, who is humanoid and armored with above average squad size at 11. He moves slow at initiative 8, but has 2 types of attacks, a spear that does well against mounted units, and a javelin that also does well against mounted, but has a range of 2. What's the big specialty here? Well, if you stack a bunch of Phalanx next to each other, they get the formation bonus, letting each Phalanx unit get an extra swing when attacking. Let's look at these little anarchists, surname Krusty, which are super anti-war camp. If they're near an enemy war camp, these crusty units can just decide what that war camp does on its turn. You can make the war camp attack an ally. Yes, war camps can attack, and yes, you can attack any unit in this game. Or maybe like more zombies, we got the Living Dead. He can use his full turn to sacrifice half of himself, spawning those units that were sacrificed into an adjacent space. And yep, that's an entirely new squad with its own initiative. To help him heal back up, he gets to regain a squad member every time he takes undead damage, and since he's undead, undead damage doesn't hurt him anyways. So have your other undead unit, bleeding horrors like my butthole after spicy food, do their maul for death damage. Mini heal, woohoo! Actually, yes, this is a perfect time to explain that every unit, including your warlord, has elemental weaknesses, resistances, and immunities. Wow, that's a lot of interactions, as most units have at least one thing they're influenced by a bit differently. Oh, did you think we're done? No, the nuance keeps going. You can hire a bunch of craftsmen, the Guild of Artificers, who literally cannot attack, but can build roads on the map, and get loyalty for doing so. They're also amazing at repairing things. If at full health, they can heal your war camp or settlement for 11 health. Oh, and then there's plenty of stuff that leans really hard into money as a mechanic, like these mercenaries who you pay money to turn them chaotic or lawful. Or Domesticate Corvus, making all the units around them pay double upkeep at the end of each round. Or my favorite, hire a bounty hunter that will give you 16 gold every time he kills something, and he can vanish to temporarily disappear from the map whenever he wants. Speaking of elite units, you may have seen these upgrades into, which is all the possible elite units a specific squad can go. They just get enough loyalty, take their entire turn, and bam, they just become a new elite unit. No credit card, no sign up, no additional fee required. This makes deploying squads even more nuanced because you're not only thinking about each squad's use on the battlefield now, but also what they could become later down the line. How about this entertaining upgrade? Have a splitting thorn hedge eventually become a fruitful sycamore. Yes, now you have a freaking tree. Your tree can take an action to grow fruit, and then have your units harvest the fruit to heal themselves or sell it for 8 gold. And this upgrade idea is super ingrained into some squads, like the inexpensive freed slaves who are good at attacking war camps and settlements. Give you loyalty for doing so, then you can spend the loyalty to become any of these strong elite units. Like have them become this vampire who can turn into a bat to move faster. Because units are so nuanced, Warbonds is filled with all these little cool combos you can do. Remember Scarred Rufus the Red who can let allies do undead damage to themselves? You can have the masochistic Painbringers who want to take damage, do a little bit to themselves. 1 damage is nothing, letting them do their Pain Seeker to gain 1 loyalty. Pain is good. Then remember that Scarred Rufus gets leadership from this. Or you can have a mythical Siren who can do a morning call to have any ally units deployed right next to her start immediately enabled. You can have 2 Living Dead, of which can split themselves into 2 as an action, split themselves next to her twice, and then each new Living Dead immediately can just do something they're not disabled. And now you have 2 loyalty on the mythical Siren. This is all without spending any money if you were to normally deploy. Warbonds Master gives so much decision making in finding the right unit not only to counter your opponents, but work together and combo off of your own units, including your Warlord. Like maybe you play defensive by hiring a bunch of slow moving but strong firing plants. Or launch sneak attacks by hiring flying units to fly over a terrain to your opponent's war camps or settlements. Or terrorize the countryside by attacking neutral settlements with a bunch of freed slaves to later upgrade them. Or you can... I think you get the point, okay? There's just so much in this booklet, and it's really up to you to figure out which one to get and when and where to deploy them on this map that makes sense for your army, especially in terms of gold cost. So much. There's another cool trade-off in your army management with settlement control, where you want to watch your army size. See, to go over to settlements, bring up your trumpet and say, "We are now your Lord Protectors, pay us money every round." You need to have a big enough total army depending on that settlement size. Level 1 Wee Hamlet only needs 10 or more dudes. This dynamic makes choosing to spawn elite units, whether through upgrading or not, a little tricky, because elite units are generally stronger, but are only 1 dude. So they're just 1 towards your army size, as opposed to a bunch of units, like a squad of 11 phalanx soldiers. With that unit stuff being said, unit positioning is also pretty interesting to play around, because you have all these different types of terrain on the map, from mountains, to forest, to even roads. Sometimes you want units to stay on certain types of terrain, like having undead stay on a swamp to heal them for 1 HP every turn. Plus, being close to roads is very useful, since moving onto one is 1 free move. You don't even have to initiate the movement to do that, so that means that you have access to full turn abilities even when moving onto a road. Look at that, Boulder Hurlers chuck Big Rock 8 damage. To position, there's 4 different types of movement to do. So there's normal, mountain, aquatic, and flying. Not only is this another thing to look out for when spawning units, but it makes you play around terrain carefully, like aquatic units move painfully slow, whereas flying units can just fly over any terrain, and even enemy units. You'll want to space very well to abuse attacks range as much as possible. Remember, law units get loyalty when attacking next to your Warlord. Or whenever your Warlord attacks at all, chaos units around him all get loyalty. That's a lot of loyalty. Oh, and then we haven't talked much about the War Camp yet, which is a cool hub that can restore nearby squad's ammo or health to full, or heal your Warlord. But yeah, defend that, because if it dies, you lose the game. The last pro is how Warbonds is able to handle its no randomness well due to its sheer complexity of systems, so let's just go back to me saying that in the Apprentice review. Warbonds handles its no randomness element well because of the mass amount of decision making with all the unit depth, and also how there's just more elements coming in the game with the entry of new squads. In multiplayer, the fact that some units, like this Domestic Corvus, can move 7 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, means a lot. And then some units have area of effect abilities, so when you're using that to target multiple players on the board, that can really change game states. Warbonds does not feel solved at all because of what new combos players can theorycraft in combining units or doing a backdoor attack with a flying unit. It's like pulling all these training card abilities out of your butt, these nuanced units. But then everyone has access to this butt and then knew about it this whole time with this player booklet of squads. Okay, back to here. So the replay value of this game is just straight ridiculous. Like, there's so many games you can play and just trying each of the Warlords, the 12 Warlords, once, and the game comes with recommended builds for each Warlord, so you can theorycraft so much in the game and even outside the game. Like, look at all that for 1 Warlord, all that information. Like, we've played about a dozen hours of this game and haven't even come close to spawning every unit, especially most of the elite units. And you can make your own maps with a bunch of terrain. So yeah, you buy this game, you're set. You probably aren't even thinking about having to buy expansions. To wrap up the pros, Warbonds Master has its theme meeting gameplay well, even more so than Apprentice, because not only of the sheer amount of unique unit interactions in this book, but also how you have intricate terrain, settlements on the board to manage, and also how gold is a thing now. There's all sorts of ways to build or harvest things to improve settlements, kill things for gold bounties, or walk around a certain terrain for buffs or debuffs. It's so fitting to have a puppet master controlling a hot metal golem, where that hulking beast is so hot it gives enemies around it weakness to fire. But if the puppet master gets out of range of that hot metal golem, like if someone assassinates said puppet master, that hulking golem is uncontrolled and can't do anything anymore. That is until any puppet master appears and takes control of it. The fact that your warlord is just venturing around the land to different types of terrain that gives different types of units is really fitting, like getting a frog from water. Or the conflict between lawful and chaotic, like how protecting a settlement gives your law units loyalty, or how attacking one makes them lose a loyalty. But if you have chaotic units, they like attacking. They get a loyalty from pillaging settlements. Oh, and if you kill a settlement, you get a ton of gold. Maybe you use that money to hire some mercenaries and use their ability to make paying for their loyalty super cheap. Now we get to the cons of this gigantic game. And where do I even start? The rulebook still suffers from the same problems as the Apprentice rulebook, so let's flash back to that a bit. All the rulebook and player guide complaints hold up. They're just turned up a notch, because if you're going to make the rules a little more complicated and have 4 times the amount of units in this booklet, well, it's just going to be clunkier. So now let's get to the component cons, and this is an alpha version of Warbonds, but the components right now are so clunky. Okay, wide angle, and let's get to the zoom in. Yeah, these unit pieces, you cannot see what's going on unless you're super close. For the initiative table and board, it's just god awful to see what unit is what. And you can't see whose units is whose on the initiative table because you can't mark units for players. Why not put the art that is on every card on the actual pieces? Okay, and then the game board will probably have to be bigger too. While surnames like Simple or Rockhead are entertaining to see, they're just not readable. Take out all these tiny symbols and get the basics right of what seeing what units are. Art, surname, and then probably movement. Oh, and flying units are probably just inherently going to be a little janky with stands because they share spaces with ground units. But then that's just kind of what that is. I can't think of a way to solve this problem. Let me know in the comments if you can think of a solution. Where the Master version gets hurt visually a lot compared to the Apprentice version is its huge emphasis on terrain. Like the forest and the swamp, they look the same. Can you see the difference? No? How about if I blow it up here? Yeah, there is a difference there, but it's hard to tell. Or how the movement numbers are sometimes hard to see, and especially when it starts getting all these symbols for special terrain, that's hard to make out. Again, another area where the game could have been helped by just being bigger, but how about outlining each terrain a specific color, at least? The unit cards aren't much better. Yeah, these are pretty normal sized cards with not normal sized information. Like if the cards were bigger, you just wouldn't have to rely on the player booklet as much, making for easier play. Plus, you see these medicine bottle looking items, good or evil, lawful or chaotic. These need to be color coded or have a symbol, since they are very important for most parts of the game. Wait, but then the pieces have color coding for tiny text law versus chaos, which comes out of nowhere because those colors aren't on the cards. Plus, blue text for evil unit that is lawful is kind of confusing, symbols required here. While we're on alignments, neutrality as a term is really weird because there's neutral for good and evil, and neutral with regards to lawful and chaotic. Maybe make lawful and chaotic have its own impartial term instead. Okay, so now let's get to the gameplay cons and strap in. So first let's start with Warlord balance. We have this Warlord, Scarred Rough as the Red. This guy has a really odd last ability to give him more maximum health in duels. This is worded where that maximum health only applies during a duel, meaning that if he takes a ton of damage in duels, he is still alive and can probably outlast his opponent. This feels pretty underpowered in most cases, since it only gives you a benefit if you're dueling the last player in the game. For this to be way more flexible, we would have added a line that if he ends a duel and would die, he can spend multiple leadership to remain at 1 health. If you want something overpowered, we have Fallen Isis. Freaking Isis, man. She is just so strong on so many levels. She has the highest Warlord HP in the game, the capacity to fly, an area of effect attack, and when any humanoid unit dies around her, she could just replace it with an undead unit for half the cost of normal. Half the cost! And at the end of every one of her turns, does 1 undead damage to everything around her and herself, and doing undead damage to herself heals her, ha 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 ha. Like, compare this to Flying Vilna, the highest progressed form of another Warlord, which has less movement, doesn't have an area of effect attack, and does have a heal, but it's not automatic. We could go on, but the point is, the Warlords are just not balanced, and you can get away with that in multiplayer with a lot of people because politics, but in the 1v1 or 3-player mode, you just can't. More weird unit design comes up with the Highlanders, these super cool looking elite units, but they're just not good to get. They're super expensive, like 86 gold for a Storm Sworn, which is almost all your starting gold, and they don't even do that much damage to compensate. 10 damage with a normal melee attack. Okay, nothing mind-blowing for 86 gold. Oh, but then what's this Stormblade ability? Well, it can do thunder damage with range, but it needs loyalty, of which it can only get by killing another Highlander? But then there's a downside where they only do 5 damage if there's another Highlander on the map. Okay, so then why would you ever spawn a Highlander if there's another one? Because while that hurts the other Highlander, it also hurts the one you just spawned and paid 86 gold for. What a counterintuitive unit. There's 3 of these that all follow this trend, and feel like a screw around flashy unit that doesn't merit being played. Speaking of those elite Highlanders, let's talk about the upgrade system to get elites. It's actually broken. It's a cool principle, but the problem is that it's too much value to upgrade, where the game ends up incentivizing you playing safe and finding a way to farm loyalty. You can get loyalty from attacking, but since attacking is risky and requires you to move away from your war camp, it's usually much safer and efficient to chill for loyalty. This gets annoying because with a game of this size, you can't counterplay someone doing this loyalty farm, where sometimes they can spawn a unit, pay for loyalty at the end of the turn, and maybe they get a loyalty, like say the Warlord gives them one, and then that squad's only turn just ends up becoming an elite unit. What? Sounds too good to be true? Don't believe me? Well, say you spawn freed slaves for 12 money, then pay 4 more to pay for loyalty, then spend 1 action with your Warlord, then turn the freed slaves into a puppet master that's worth 38 gold. Like, wow, you just got a 22 gold boost by spending 1 Warlord action. Or you could spend a lot of effort to upgrade units, then take their turn to recall them, which takes them off the map and gives you half of their deploy cost at the end of the round. That can be good money. Or how about doing this cheese play, getting a golem for free with the puppet master, then recalling it for 38 gold. Upgrade shenanigans slow down the game by injecting money into players in unhealthy ways, and by encouraging turtling goes against the Warlord fighting idea here. How could this be fixed? Well, aside from tweaking a bunch of numbers on upgrade costs and deploying values and probably some upkeep value there, what you could do is make this map much smaller, or giving bigger incentives to just close out the game faster. But this upgrade system probably just needs to be overhauled and relooked at. And we have to talk about the must squint to look at terrain, which is in practice way too slow to move through. Like, look at this river tile that requires 3 normal movement to move through, but then most units that move normally only move 3 to 4 spaces. So their entire movement is just moving onto a river, which is agonizing. This can make terrain on some maps just feel like straight walls, or no-go zones for many units because of how slow they are to go through. This might be intentional and leads to some technically thematic design, like having a bunch of mountains clumped up in one space, but ends up slowing the game a lot and punishing normal movement too much. Moving normally is a punishment in of itself, so if it's gonna get punished again, it should get punished at 2 times the value, not 3 times as much. But then if you made it 2 times the movement punishment, then that would make river the same as moving into a mountain or a swamp. So then maybe just add on some separate text to these terrain? Maybe make normal movement all higher and then just keep river the same penalty at 3? This has the right idea, like penalizing the other types of movement totally works. Penalizing mountain movement is fine because mountain movement is generally pretty fast. Or rewarding aquatic movements by moving through water and penalizing them for every single other terrain makes a lot of sense because aquatic units are generally a bit stronger. How do tactical RPGs handle different movement and terrain? Let's go back to FF Tactics, where first of all, terrain is super easy to see, and the game automates your movement possibilities. Second, the maps are usually way smaller, so when you're getting penalized by a couple spaces, being restricted to move 1 to 2 spaces is fine. Now let's talk about this dueling mechanic, where you go up to another warlord and take an action to challenge them to a duel. It doesn't quite work in this master version, although it did work in the apprentice version. We praised the dueling in the apprentice version because it was a cool outlet for loyalty, encouraging units to be near your warlords, and being a type of chicken minigame where players were anxious about pulling out of the duel. That just doesn't happen anymore, with the vastly different ways that Warbonds Master handles units. Let's start with the introduction of elite units to the game. Because they're so strong, they really throw off the dueling dynamic. Now it's not such a good idea to go up to your enemy warlord and challenge them to a duel, because now you're going to be close to your enemy's elite units. So then on that elite unit's turn, they can go up to your warlord and attack them for a lot of damage. Also, it's not good to challenge your enemy warlord to a duel when there's elite units nearby, because when they interfere in the duel, they just do more because they're just stronger units. Then you don't have as many units in general in Warbonds Master, since units have a gold cost and upkeep. Yeah, you just can't spawn a ton of units until you hit 6 army cap anymore that you used to do in Apprentice. This gives you less options to take loyalty from when you duel. That is, if you even want to take loyalty from your squads for dueling, because why not just save that loyalty to upgrade them, which is a really good way to get money value. Some warlords just give you no incentive to duel and don't interact with it, making dueling a mechanic you basically entirely forget about with some warlord matchups. This wasn't a problem in Warbonds Apprentice, because every single warlord had some way to affect dueling. In a multiplayer game with certain warlords, it's not surprising to see 0 duels ever happen. If dueling is to be something in this game, it needs to give more an advantage to the attacker, the person initiating the duel. Okay, getting 1 leadership is nice, but that usually doesn't compensate for the fact that your attack can now get blocked by an enemy squad, and your target gets to attack you back, unless you spend precious loyalty from your own squads to block the attack. But then you could have used that loyalty to upgrade your units. Perhaps giving the duel initiator an additional bonus, like a guaranteed first strike, would help? Or maybe putting in some consideration that elite units cannot or have very limited interference in duels? Dueling just needs a lot more consideration if it's going to be kept in Warbonds with the upgrade system as well. Okay, now for the rest of the cons, let's talk about some more gameplay cons, where Warbonds Master can run a long time, much longer on average than its estimated 90 minutes to 300 minutes. And it doesn't really justify that long time length with its systems. Warbond systems just make it fiddly as all heck, but that's just what's going to happen with so many pieces and cards. One way to easily reduce the fiddliness is to have the gold pieces just be a dial you keep track of, instead of tiny gold pieces. You can do this because the money pieces are never actually going anywhere in the game, and we even had one player just start writing down his gold at some point to save time. So the units, yes, reading them adds a lot of time, as you gotta find the synergies with one another. You're really encouraged to spend time on this, probably going through analysis paralysis to find the best combinations. There's so much of the feeling that there is another unit that could be a better option, or maybe you should save your money, or maybe you go backwards in value because you can later upgrade it. Oh, but then since money is a thing, you're viewing units in terms of their gold value, and so you don't really want to lose units, as one dying is losing at least 10 gold permanently. It's best when you can attack with units, get as much damage out of them, then retreat them before they die, heal them back up in base, then send them out again. This really incentivizes players to carefully math out how much damage each unit could possibly do to one another before they do any move. Plus, the tighter you get on money, the likely slower you'll play to conserve your units. So yeah, the game can continue to get slower. Then there's some other stuff that is painfully slow, like getting your settlement to level 6 to win the game. You'll need 18 growth tokens to do this, where yeah, you get 1 every single round, and then to get more, you probably need to use some ability like this, but it will usually just give you 1 growth token. Compare this to the Apprentice version, where you only needed 6 growth tokens for your war camp to win, and the game had less units, and no upgrade system. It was just much simpler. And you know what? That game took easily 3 to 4 hours for multiplayer. Why not have settlements naturally gain 2 growth tokens a turn instead of 1, if there's so much emphasis on de-leveling settlements through abilities, and then there's nuance behind every single level of settlement. And then this event, the bid for influence, which feels pretty underpowered to bid for. Like 2 growth tokens barely get you towards 18 growth tokens, whereas in the Apprentice version, 2 growth tokens was a third of the way to 6 that won you the game, so it felt really impactful to win this event. In the Master Set, bid for influence really feels like it should give you at least 1.5 levels for your settlement, so 4 growth tokens instead of 2. A final way to have this game faster for newcomers is to just have the recommended builds have a lot more play tips on them. Like, super cool to see that each warlord has 4 recommended starting builds, but can the game explain at least somewhat what direction this is all going towards? As for nitpicks, we have the exact same ones that are in the Apprentice version, mostly to do with how there are some easy to forget rules. The nitpicks don't do much to change our scoring, so let's just get on to that. Now it's time for a tentative score on Warbonds Master, a game we've come so far in initially reviewing the Apprentice rules version, and now we're here for the alpha version of Warbonds Master. So by critically evaluating our aforementioned pros and cons, and thinking about whether or not this is even a good idea in the first place, Warbonds Master set is going to get a 4 out of 10. It is below average. As we hinted at in the beginning of this video, the Warbonds system is really a bunch of games in one. Video game tactical RPG gameplay with all the complexity, terrain, area effect abilities, and none of the randomness. You're also constantly spawning units from outside the game and having counters on them, kind of like a trading card game. Then there's some slight civilization building with settlements and war camp progression with gold income to manage. Then at its core, Warbonds is a battle royale with your warlord. This is all pretty cool, a good mash of ideas, but this is a board game where visual clarity and component jumbling are extremely rough right now. You can see all that. So mechanically speaking, 63 units. Like, what? Really? It's not just the abilities too. You're constantly trying to see your opponent's elemental resistances, movement patterns, or flying or not. Or maybe they're trying to upgrade their unit. Well, then you need to see what upgrade paths they can take. Warbonds Apprentice could get away with this more complexity with only 18 units, which already felt like a steep learn, but definitely doable, especially since it didn't have an upgrade system. It wasn't long before you'd see the same units from a type of alignment, and then quickly memorize them. Think StarCraft, the real-time strategy game where there's also tons of units. Well, first, they're split up between 3 factions. Next, they only have 2 types of subcategories, small, medium, or large. Then armored or not. And that's it for a game that people dedicate hundreds of hours to in studying the game. And each game takes easily under an hour, as opposed to Warbonds multiple hours. Warbonds lawful versus chaotic, and good versus evil, or maybe magical, or construct, or bestial, or wild, or plant, or humanoid, or you get it, okay? And then there's also 4 abilities. With the public information and all the little nuances of each unit, playing Warbonds is awe-inducing and letting you soak in each unit's possibilities, but at the same time, really alienating for most people. Like, every single unit is an exception in its own way, and there's no video game UI to help, like you would see in a tactical RPG, of which this game shares a very similar game structure too. Instead, it's manually counting up your friends' loyalty counters or flipping through the catalog to read what the heck is going on, then going back to your own units. Warbonds Master can be the epitome of, haha, I gotcha with this ability. Like, oh, you had some +1 attack against my magical unit, so now you do 4 damage. But wait, that's an ice attack, so I'm weak to ice, so that does 8 damage. Oh, no, actually, wait, the squads can't take more than 1 damage per attack, so it's actually only 4 damage. Oh, and then on my turn, I attack you back, and look, I actually do more damage because I'm next to my warlord, which gives me a +1 attack. Impressive, and offers insane replay value with a lot of very interesting board states. That is, if you're bothered to keep track of it all. Here's some cool things that help you play and also paint a better picture of what Warbonds is. This initiative guide at the back of your player guide, or the damage types of all the units listed at the back of the player guide, or this gigantic sheet. It looks like something out of a Pokemon. And just like that, it also tells you what each unit is vulnerable to and resistant against. Yep, if we could sum up Warbonds in a single photo, this is pretty good. This sheet right here is truly prime evidence on how crazy Warbonds Master is. And this sheet could have been less overwhelming by just hacking off the fat and trimming a lot of the units away. Think about how much smaller this could have been. Right now, 63 in terms of quantity ends up dirtying much of the game and has its dirty tendrils seeping into everything. Like, why are there so many different types of terrain on each map to keep track of? Oh, they're there because they wanted to have a bunch of units spawn in different places. And you probably want to have enough units per type of terrain to make sure law and chaos and good and evil have enough to choose from. Or why are there so many elite units? Oh, it's because they wanted to give a lot of squads upgrade pass, and there's 30 plus squads. Or why is this booklet so thick and why do I have to keep sifting back and forth through it? Oh, it's because it contains 21 pages of units. Or why are there so many pieces and cards? It's because the game wanted to have 63 units, so you'll need hundreds of cards and tokens to sift through. So thank goodness there's 2 planos, but yeah, it's still a lot. Games that have a big collection of units to choose from usually have some way to restrict what you're playing with. MTG Lands and Colors is a great example. War games like Warhammer or Legacies of Lure have you pick from a bunch of units to spawn at the beginning of the game, and then you can't spawn more units. Warbonds only has the good versus evil hard limitation, and then the chaos versus law is a deterrent, but not a big one in spawning differently aligned units. And then the game just has a bunch of neutral units too to blow the whole thing up. When we initially saw all the units, we thought, wow, this could be grounds for X Factor and pros, especially with how cool the Warlords already are. But the stiff truth is that variety has a drop-off point because the quantity and specificity of each unit make the bookkeeping seep pretty hard into the mechanics. This is rough, okay? Because what makes this game what it is having so many units, and it does work, but you just can't play the game without a ton of analysis paralysis, or spending a lot of time outside the game to study this like a textbook. And whatever the case, it's going to take a long time to finish a game of Warbonds Master. To put it extremely lightly, Warbonds Master is a game and a half that you definitely cannot simply play on a given night. Maybe you wouldn't even want to read the player booklet on any given night. Maybe you want to read that booklet more than actually playing the game. Warbonds Battle for Vitoria Master Set Alpha version isn't bad. With changes, it could really sing with the right group. Perhaps more of a lean into the apprentice model is the right idea to streamline the units and speed up the game. Or perhaps if the game is going to be this long, give it more compelling progression. Anyways, Punk This Studios, I'm calling you guys out. Yep, I am. It's clear you put a lot of love and dedication into this game. And so whatever's next for Warbonds, whatever it is, I'm sure you can do it. If you have all these cross-reference cards with all the so many abilities, you can really make this game sing. My personal score for Warbonds Master Set is going to be a 4 out of 10. Below average. Okay, holy cow, is this game quite a story. So I started with the Apprentice set, was initially overwhelmed by that, hunkered down to learn and play that game, and actually ended up liking it with a 6 out of 10 rating. But then when I went to hunker down on this Master Set, oh my gosh, the overwhelmingness never stopped. What is the point of, what is the breaking point for you guys? Because all the information in this game was the breaking point for me. Too much information in a game presented all at once. Could I eventually learn the ins and outs of each unit? Definitely. It would be like playing a trading card game and only knowing 63 units, where each of them is the top of the line in complexity. But in a trading card game, you learn that over time, not all at once. And I'm not looking for such information overhead in a multiplayer board game. I love the idea of how detailed each unit is, but how is my small head supposed to keep track of all that while playing? Add that onto an upgrade system, terrain that really matters, and then settlements to worry about. I kid you not, I constantly forget abilities in this game, and that's not even including the 12 Warlords, which have really special abilities of their own, which again, would be cool. It just adds so much to an already big formula. There's teleportation. Some have different forms. I'm forgetting a lot of stuff. See, I actually liked that in Apprentice, you had no gold, and you had more units on the field on average. That gave me more of a sense of tacticalness during turns, getting to position with each unit carefully, and possibly stack abilities. Now with Master, you have a handful of units, cool elites, but the rounds just don't feel as interesting to me and push a lot more of the abilities and research them, upgrade them, instead of using which abilities you already have. It really feels like if I don't read the player booklet enough, I'll just miss the edge needed to win fights. But I don't want to just AP the heck out and just keep reading a booklet next to my friends. But then if I don't, then someone will gotcha me with their type of resistance and normal damage, or an area of affectability, or so much my brain. Plus, with the ridiculous amount of pieces here, Warbonds Master is just too fiddly for me. Now you have a gold, you have 2 Plano boxes, you have a thicker squad deck, you have the introduction of an elite deck. Progression in Warbonds Master also feels bad because your war camps and settlements progress so slowly, and after the 3rd round, you're usually pretty money starved, so you can't spawn as many units as you would want. And the game is so long, like sheesh, 4 hours for 3 players is being generous. Now, I don't have a bad time with this game, because not only is the theme and premise cool to me, the units are cool to handle individually, and what's more, the payoff from finding the right unit interactions or like all these cool light bulb moments. Oh, this is how I'm supposed to use this unit, and then I can combine it with that unit over there. oh, and then later I can upgrade that one, and then that one gets me a lot of gold. See, it does feel good once you figure it out. The problem is that when you're actually playing the game, the complete picture of everything is just so much to handle, and it feels like I would have more fun just sitting down and reading this booklet and being entertained by that. After playing this Warbond system and still being solid on a 6 out of 10 for Apprentice, I actually want to play this game digitally now. I could get in a ton of reps to actually learn the units, not have to worry about setup, and best of all, learn at my own pace. So, fingers, double cross for that now, because man, am I impressed with the unit nuance. That was it, guys. We finished it. Warbonds Master Set Review. Again, we got the Apprentice version. Probably somewhere over there by now. Maybe it's in the bar nearby. Oh my god, my brain. I'm sorry. This game was just so much. Thank you to our patrons. And Punk This Studios sending us this game did not affect scoring. And thank you to our patrons as usual. We have all your names going over there, going over here. We also got our Mad Lads of Cardboard. Thank you guys so much. And as always, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of this game. Cloudspire is a substitute, but yeah, would you play this game digitally? Would you play it now? Would you want to try reading the booklet? Let me know. See ya.